Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Designing for Water, Turning Flooding into Habitat. I'm Lexi from Moraine Native Plant Community. Tonight's topic is one that so many of us are dealing with more and more each year, water. Whether it's standing water after heavy rains, we just had some yesterday, it's April, there's more rain to come, or areas that just won't behave the way that we want them to. These challenges can feel frustrating and difficult to manage. But what if those problem areas could become some of the most valuable parts of your landscape? Tonight, we're going to explore how shifting our perspective on water can open up new possibilities, not just for solving drainage issues, but for creating thriving, ecologically rich spaces that support wildlife and improve the health of our environment. We're incredibly fortunate to have someone with deep hands-on experience in this work joining us tonight. Our speaker, Jack Pizzo, is the founder of Pizzo Native Plant Nursery, one of the leading native plant nurseries in the Midwest. Jack has spent decades working with native landscapes, specializing in ecological restoration, wetland environments, and the use of native plants to solve real-world site challenges. His work has helped shape large-scale restorations as well as practical solutions for homeowners dealing with difficult conditions like flooding and poor drainage. Tonight, he'll be sharing insights on how to work with water instead of against it, and how even the wettest areas of your yard can become thriving habitat. Please join me in welcoming Jack Pizzo. Nice to see you,
Good
Jack.
evening. Good to see you too. I'm excited to be here.
We are too. This is such a great topic, and so many people just struggle with flooding in their yards. In fact, walking around my neighborhood yesterday, I could not believe how many yards were flooded. And if they just knew the secrets that you're going to tell us about tonight, maybe they could change their situation.
Yeah. It's sort of common sense, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So as you see the solution, then you're like, well, why don't they do that? That's just common sense, and you realize maybe they haven't heard the good word, so to speak.
And that's why we're trying to broadcast it
So
tonight.
that's it. All right. Well, let me know when we're ready to start.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Let's do that. Hit that button. All right. You see it?
Yep, we can see it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm just going to dive right in. We'll do about an hour and I'll get all this the information out to you. And this is all about green infrastructure. That's the fancy word for how we deal with uh, things like a raindrop where it falls, because you don't really want to um, deal with it as it gets collected. The faster the more volume that you put into a system, and most people think of it as pipes, though that's called gray infrastructure. So we're doing the opposite, dealing with it on a ecological level, where we deal things like stormwater, air quality, water quality, creating habitat, and it can be from a green roof all the way to a massive restoration of prairie wetland and savanna. And what you realize is that it's every planting and every square foot, because rain falls or precipitation, as the snow falls and then it melts, it falls everywhere, every square foot. So even if you look at it from the standpoint of the highest, driest location, you're actually dealing with water, because you want the water to go into the ground, not and or be dealt with through natural systems rather than go across the ground and then be built up into a volume that can cause problems like erosion control or picking up pollutants that end up decreasing water quality. This is our drawing based on the work of Weaver in the Dust Bowl days, and those dark lines in this are 5 feet. So if you look over to the left over here, this is bluegrass with its 3-inch deep root system, and then an alternative to bluegrass is buffalo grass. which I have about 3/4 of an acre, and that has about a 6 to 8 foot deep root system. And then all the other native plants in their deep roots. And what happens is about 25% of that root system dies every year, much like the leaves that fall off a tree. And as those roots go out into the soil, fungi and bacteria follow them down, living organisms, and it picks that soil up. Whether that's sand, which doesn't need much structural change, but clays and silts end up needing to be broken up. And if you do that, your water storage capacity on any given acre increases dramatically. As the son of a professor, I got this from the get-go. Education is the key. Now, when we're doing this work, we're actually working in three different areas. The landscapes, which many of you will put in native plants in your landscape, yank out a burning bush and put in a black haw viburnum, or you will take out bluegrass and put in buffalo grass for your lawn. Um, do it how you want, plant the plants that are appropriate for your site. The naturalized landscape is, and I should say, um, it's more of a regulatory thing, but it's also a voluntary thing. And then we have the Holy Grail or Rosetta Stone, which are the remnant ecosystems. And that's a chunk of nature that's not been fully manipulated. So here's an example of a landscape. This is the rain garden at the headquarters of Radio Flyer in Chicago. And you have, rain gardens and naturalized landscape that all these pictures, by the way, we had something to do with either supplying the plant or install them or steward the site. Retention ponds, which are really engineered stormwater management system, and a naturalized space like this where they just decided to do it. That stormwater system is required by law to retain back that water, to release it at the appropriate volume that equal to pre-development. And then there are remnant systems like this, the Cook County Forest Preserve Shoe Factory Road Prairie, that is dense with native plants, or a client of ours, this beech maple oak hickory complex in Berrien County, or the very narrowly distributed dune ecosystems that are around the Great Lakes. And there's a difference between the landscape and anything that is natural. Landscaping focuses only on aesthetics and prioritizes appearance. It bears no connection between your yard, my yard, and the neighbors or anybody or anywhere around. And it requires a lot of inputs. You can imagine what they are. They're also chemicals. But landscaping is static. It's designed to be the way it is and not change from year to year, other than your Japanese barberry hedge gets a foot taller. And it's often in square feet, not acres. Non-native plants tend not to reproduce unless they do reproduce, and then they become invasive species. But there's a serious loss of biological diversity in landscapes as well as genetic diversity. And people that work in landscapes tend to be mechanically inclined, like, oh, I can mow the lawn, I can operate a saw to cut the bricks and do the hardscape. And they're not really plant or soil people. When you do ecosystem work, whether that's naturalized landscape and landscaping or restoration, it's working with the environment. There is a connection between our properties. We know that we all have rain and snow, and that the droughts come and the clay cracks. They're dynamic. They change year to year, day to day, season to season. They are never the same, which makes it so that when you look out the window, it's like, wow, or you walk through an area, it's completely different. Native plants reproduce. You get free seeds every year, free plants every year. You can pick them up and move them or trade them or go from, move them around your property. And it is what you do with the greater part of your land. So acres, or square miles. And you do stewardship, which is dynamic, not maintenance, which is static. And it creates a healthy, beautiful landscape that is nature's will tell you what to do. And we know that when we take out non-native plants, native plants properly placed will thrive. And the people that do the work in the industry are generally plant and soil people. They understand how to put this together. So if it's a stormwater management system, you have the right plants in the right place, and the water in the pond looks good, or the water flows through there, the erosion stops. It's doing things that in a way that you're faithful to what you have. Now, most people understand this concept through, like, if you're restoring a historic house, you don't put aluminum siding on that 1870s mansard uh, slate tile roof and cover it over with some cheap paint. It's you got to do a restoration that's faithful to the actual design of it, and you don't put Hyundai parts in a classic Gull Wing Mercedes Benz. So you really do have to think about what is specific to my site. And it's basically right tool for the right job, right plant for the right place. That if you plant it properly, and these two pictures are a year apart, that you put the right things in there. They're shorter, they're more dry, they're whatever the case may be, that you really need to think about it because it's ultimately the thing that most people see. You don't generally see the engineering, you might see the hardscape, but it's the plants that people react to. I hear people saying, well, oh my God, with all the changes in the climate, are these plants going to survive? And I will tell you, yes, because the last glaciers that came through here pushed everything, including the tundra, down into Tennessee, or southern Illinois. So all of our plants that are now up north have southern gene pools. And this will be no problem. It's not about will the plants in nature survive? It's will we survive? That's the big thing. And that's what we need to do, is to make sure that we have a place that we can live that is someplace that, you would want to live. When you're doing ecosystem work, I know most gardeners know of a zone map, but this is an ecosystem map of the United States. And if you notice, the colors kind of go up and down and east and west. And that's based on the soil type, the topography, the proximity to water, or the proximity to mountains and the lack of water. And it gets down to even where a foot over, 2 feet over can change an ecosystem. So you really begin to realize that to do this work, you're looking at site-specific planning, not broad brush. Oh, it grows in zone 2, so I can plant it here. No, that's not how it works. And each state has their ecological or geologic maps and their ecosystem maps. And there's some that are like the Wisconsin one here, that's a historic one from the 1880s, or Indiana and Illinois are a little bit more current. But every state has them, and you can get down to sometimes county level historic maps. And historic data is good. You need to look at that in order to understand how things have changed. Restoration also works fast. When you're putting these plants in, that's planted in October, and that's the June after it. This was a plug planting, and from October to June, this became habitat for indigo buntings. And it works at any scale, small scale, like this little suburban yard, all the way up to the scale that, as far as the eye can see, and it rolls over the topography. And I kind of always get to the point of like, well, how do you start? What do you do? First and foremost, you have to realize this is about people. Nature does not care. As a matter of fact, nature doesn't really exist outside of people. because, after the Industrial Revolution, it only took 2 generations for people to completely miss that they were connected to the environment. And that, Andrea Wolf wrote the book in The Invention of Nature, and it's about Alexander von Humboldt exploring the natural world and writing about it. And people were amazed that nature existed. Um, and you just have to understand that you're really working with psychology and sociology when you're working with people, which is what's going on inside your head and then what's going on between us. And realize that you have to connect with people to get this work done, to sell to your clients, to change a law, to write an ordinance, to, make people understand why they have to comply with things. Or, look, I can't just plant cactus in your pond because you said you wanted them there. Here's an ecological reason. You give them data. And if you don't study history, and if you don't look at the successes you've had and the failures, even the successes and failures of others, you're doomed to repeat it. And I also have people say, well, oh, it's this group of people that support nature and those people don't. And yeah, no, everybody does. And I can tell you this, that it's the bullets and arrows people that should be best friends with the birds and butterfly people, and vice versa. Because in the election of 2024, we know what happened at the federal level, the local level, 4 counties around Cook County, which is the county Chicago's in Illinois. Those are red counties by general politics, and Cook County's blue. Those 4 counties voted to tax themselves to buy and restore nature. Don't tell me that people that are red don't like nature, and don't tell me that the people that are blue always like nature. It's really an individual personal thing, and if you can find a way to connect with them, people value it. Problem is, we don't succeed as much as we when we put together these beautiful photoshops and say this is what it'll look like, because it ends up in a lot of places not looking like that, filled with invasive species in the prairie green landscape, or acres of teasel and phragmites. This is not a toy skid steer. This is an actual full-size skid steer. Or when somebody says, but I like Queen Anne's lace and I like clover for the bees. Why do you have to get rid of it in my prairie? Because this can happen. When we talk about them being invasive, it's not because I'm making the judgment. I can tell you, if you don't control them or eradicate them, they will take over. And even landscape plants jump out. That if you're putting together something that's, you want to get a beautiful place that will handle stormwater or grow in the gooey soil that's in your property, you can't plant something that will take over like Vinca. This will creep out, and this is a property in Southwest Michigan that it's taken over. And when you go there in the spring, it's silent. Silent Spring isn't about insecticides anymore. It's about invasive species, because if the bugs aren't there, the birds don't have anything to eat. And this site is silent in the spring. Now, I know there's a broad listening audience, and I hope I don't have to explain this word to you, but it's what everything in the natural world is based on. And sexual reproduction is 2 dissimilar parents coming together to create offspring that are genetically unique. Each and every one of us, and thus each and every seed that's out there, is genetically unique. That's why at my nursery, 98.9% of the plants we produce are reproduced from seeds. So every one of them is unique. So that if the ecosystem changes, you end up with good genetic diversity. Most landscape plants are clones. And that means that they are all genetically unique. Every one of those plants pictured is genetically identical. So, what do you think is going to happen when conditions change and you have a site like this? Every one of those trees will be impacted by the same conditions or the pest or the pollution. If you don't have genetic diversity within the species and you don't have biological biodiversity amongst species, you end up with things like, oh, I don't know, uh, emerald ash borers and green ash trees, or Dutch elm disease in American elms, which wiped out complete total streetscapes or natural areas. And the reason we want that diversity is because insects feed on plants. And here is something that I took these pictures in 1998. This red oak tree fed something through the year. Things are it's been eaten, it grew, it produced acorns. And 50 feet away, here's another native tree species, and it's fed something through the year. And another native tree species that it's feeding something. And 50 feet away is a Norway maple, non-native. Our native plants don't have any genetic history or ecological history with a plant from Northern Europe. That is why that's a bad plant here, because nothing will eat it. It's a good plant in Northern Europe. If you take our bur oak over there, it's a bad plant. So pulling out invasive species is important. And here's an example. If you look at oaks east of the Mississippi River, it's up here at the top. These are the number of lepidopterans, which are the moths and butterflies. The oaks support 534 species of lepidoptera. The larval stage is a caterpillar, and native insects rarely damage more than 5% of the foliage. Gardeners will accept 10%. So when you put native plants out, you're actually putting out something that insects eat, that then birds eat the insect. That's why they rarely damage more than 5%, because they are delicious to mommy and daddy bird to feed the baby bird. So when you plant an oak tree, you plant a big bird feeder. Here's an example of 3 species that we grow. Put them in a garden and it could host up to 241 species of pollinators. Pretty simple. Don't have to do much. Here's the difference between horticultural varieties and species. On the right is Annabelle hydrangea, which is a horticultural variety of the smooth hydrangea, and on the left is the species. Right, it is all sterile bracts, which have no nectar, and on the left, it's the smaller parts of those flowers are actually flowers. Now, here's the difference in pollinators. The species attracts pollinators, the horticultural variety does not. So you can cause a problem in the environment by putting out a horticultural variety. And here's another example. Right in the middle of the green is a katydid. And on the same species of katydid on a purple foliage variety of a native plant. Which one do you think the birds are going to see and be able to get and eat? So this is why horticultural varieties are sometimes not good, even though they're native. So how do we make this happen? You have to look at your site and take an inventory of it, the grading of it, the soils of it, the non-native species, the invasive species. And I just looked out my window and a Cooper's hawk is sitting right outside my window. I live on 40 acres. I digress. So when you're doing grading, you'll always want to do 5-to-1 or greater. If you can, if you don't have a very steep slope, you'll want something that you can grade slowly down into the water, or slow, low, soft, shallow slopes, because the plants can get a hold of that then and hold that soil in place. And if you create shallow water areas, That's the place you find wildlife. And you look at, let's put together a flora for your site. This is BONAP, which is the Biota of North America project. Um, this is the similarity between the flora of the Chicago region and areas around it. So if it's blue, they're 95 to 100%. And as you go out, it gets a little different. So Florida and Chicago have virtually nothing in common, or Chicago and California. But you can go around and look, like this is the floor of the Great Plains, and you can see all the areas where this works. So a species might grow in northern Oklahoma, but also grows in Wyoming. Gene pools might be different, but you can see how you can look at, here's the flora of Colorado and how similar it is to other floras in the area. For our area, this is the most recent version of this book, which includes faunal or insect associations. And you look at a species, and you can see this map is the southern end of Lake Michigan, and Chicago's right where that dot is. But in these dots, it means this is where this plant was found, and then this is what it was found with. So this isn't just a historic bit of information. This is actually, if you have this plant, or this plant is you want it to grow there, here are all the other things that will grow with it. And it tells you that in this particular location, like the Kankakee sand section, this plant grew with these other plants. So this is what you're looking at, is taking historic information and rebuilding the ecosystem from that. And you'll also make sure that you identify all the natives and the non-natives. This is your tax dollars hard at work. This is plants.usda.gov, and type in a scientific name, and there you go, Quercus macrocarpa. It's in all 102 counties of Illinois, but there's some counties in Indiana where you don't see it, or you don't see it out here in the wide open prairie of Iowa. So historically, that's its range. Now, would I plant it in that county in Missouri right there? Yeah, I'm sure it was in that county. Would I plant it up in the northern part of Indiana? Yeah, and I've seen it in some counties that aren't on this map, but nobody's submitted a voucher specimen. And so when you go out and look, like you go to our website and you'll see plant lists, these are general. You really do need to get to specifics, and come down and you get your gramineads or grass sedges and rushes, and your forbs, which are the wildflowers, and you can look at bloom times and the number of seeds per ounce. You can look at height, and the wetness, and the W value will tell you how wet or dry the plant likes it. So a -5 means it's growing in the water. Excuse me. And a +5 means it's probably growing on the top of a sand dune. The terms facultative upland, facultative wetland, obligate, you can look those up. But if you look at the W number, that's a pretty easy way to tell where it should be growing. And when you put together this list, you have to look at trying to get somewhere around 150, 200 seeds per square foot if you're doing seeding. But realize that seeds can be dust-like. And a good place, this is from Prairie Moon. The seeds of Dudley's rush are like grains of grains of salt. Yet seeds for compass plant are much bigger. So you adjust to putting in the proper number of ounces of a particular species based on its seed size. You also want to install mycorrhizal fungi if the soil has been beat up. And it never really hurts, even if it's a good soil, because these are the partners in the soil for the roots, which help the plant get water and things like phosphorus. And then the plant gives the fungus sugar. It also covers the root system, which prevents pathogenic organisms from getting to the plant's roots. When you're going to plugs and plants, I'd love to tell you that you can, plant quarts and gallons and all that stuff, but plugs are the most economical, whether they're like ours are 50 cell flats or 32 cell flats or 38 cell flats, whatever the case may be. These smaller plants are easier to plant, they're more cost effective, and they actually survive better than something that's larger. Once you have your invasive species, you know that you have to get rid of them. If they're woody species, you're going to have to cut them down or grind them down and then treat the stumps. The cambium layer is the only part of a woody plant that's alive, which is directly below the bark and above the wood. And all you have to do is put a little bit of herbicide on there, and it'll kill the plant. And then you've got once the herbicide breaks down, the plants will grow right around it. For killing invasive species like garlic mustard can be done in February. Just use a little bit of herbicide with dye in it and make sure you don't spray the good green stuff. And when the temperatures rise, the garlic mustard will die and the good stuff will be alive. And if you cut trees down for, put them in the water. We call this large organic debris. But we put this in and people are like, I didn't know we had turtles in our ponds or frogs. Well, because they were there, they're just in the vegetation. When you give them some place that they can pull out and land or sun themselves, you begin to see the diversity that's there. You will have to take care of rough fish like carp because they're like pigs in a pond. They waller in the mud, resuspend the nutrients, and that allows for things like algae to grow. So always take those rough fish out. Planting your plugs, it's pretty simple, one plug per square foot, and that'll get you a dense planting. When we're doing seed, we can put it down on a cleared site by hand. We can put it down on the snow, or we have in larger sites, or for larger sites, we have large specially designed seeding machines that handle the fine, the fluffy, and the large seed, and be able to put it in at the right depth. When it comes to designing spaces, the smaller you get, the less likely you are to be using seed. So if you're talking hundreds of square feet, you'd be using only plugs. If you're talking, tens of thousands of square feet, you might mix plugs and seed, but you're getting up above 20, 30,000 square feet, you really do need to use seed because plugs are an expensive option. Once you've got it planted, this is my Uncle Al. This is the Sicilian side of me that says, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Because once you have the plants in and the seed in, it's not about making them grow. It's all about making the non-native plants not grow. Because if you've got the right plants there, they'll thrive. So how do we do it? We mow to knock the foliage down to let the sunshine get to the ground. Because this little line of native plants there on the left, what they're doing is putting on that deep root system in the first couple of years. And they can't compete with 3 to 4 or 5 or 10 feet of weeds. They need sunshine. And they won't be up and growing and flowering from seed. You basically are just giving the little plants light. And if you mow at the right time, you can actually kill the non-native species rather than just controlling. Brush cutters, most people that think that you have to use a big machine. Sometimes the planting is in good condition. You go in and very surgically cut and remove things. Or, as my grandfather made us do when we were kids, we went out and hand pulled. And I call this the Pizzo horde of locusts, where we walk about 10 feet apart and we hand pull weeds, which then does minimal disturbance, and you create a healthy environment for the native plants and yank out the bad stuff and haul it away. We do use chemicals. The right chemical at the right time, at the right place, the right amount, never more, never less. And the goal is always to get to no chemical use. So you create a healthy ecosystem. All too often, I see people spray, and I call it the cone of death, which is somebody stood there and tried to spray one plant, but they got this nice wide spray and they killed everything in the proximity of that bad plant. And then you've just created a space for more weeds. This is a grass killing herbicide applied to a wetland edge, and it killed the reed canary grass, which that's brown, but all the mints and the iris and the sedges are all healthy. So you knock back the bad stuff and keep the good stuff. So it's use the right chemical at the right time. And for the most part, our ecosystems in the United States, North America for that matter, are fire dependent. They're not fire tolerant. They evolved with fire and they need it. Now, small gardens, you're not going to do that. What are you going to do? You're going to cut it down, rake it off, because a burn just creates dark soil that is allowed to be the sunlight to hit it. So it gets warmer and drier. And all those deep roots are fine. I put my hand on the soil after the fire, that goes over, that's 932 degrees. 90 seconds later, the soil's still 53 degrees. And I take people out and show them that, like, look, here's the fire. And then they put their hand down. They're like, wow. But on a small site, all you do is just cut stuff down, rake it off, and let the sunshine hit the ground. Burn soils are 10 degrees warmer, which gets your plants growing faster. And if you're talking about managing things like ticks, prescribed fire and ticks are mutually exclusive. This is the National Institutes of Health. They did some great studies that showed that if you burn, you get rid of ticks. Get rid of ticks, you get rid of tick-borne diseases. Hey, I can sell anybody restoration on protecting human health. So now let's go through and look at these pictures and I'll describe these projects. This is a pollinator garden at cross streets of Ridge and, oh, I forgot the name of the Pratt in Chicago. And a planting was to be done. The Field Museum went out and they found two pollinator species there. We ended up picking the right mix of species and planting 14,000 plugs. And there are 200 species of pollinators seen at this site now. And this is in Chicago at a busy intersection. Here's a little prairie planting that, has really certain species like rattlesnake master, which is the white flower, have just exploded. And we just burned this 2 days ago. I didn't take that picture 2 days ago. But you see it when you burn it, it just gets the light to the ground and all those seeds are sitting in that moist soil. They don't burn up and you get incredible density. And this is back in the beech maple savanna area. And you're doing the right amount of clearing and burning when you start seeing flowers in those areas. If you have the plants and they're not flowering, that means they need more sunshine. Sun plants do not grow into the shade. Sun plants get shaded out by brush or trees. Planting these green roofs at the Field Museum and rain gardens, right species to handle it. And in between northbound and southbound Lakeshore Drive, there is an incredible pollinator population. Or this green roof, which when we did the contract with the Chicago Park District, that's at McCormick Place, and it just thrived. Now, someplace like this will eventually be destroyed because they'll have to redo the roof of the parking garage that's below that. But like they did before, they rescued a lot of those plants when they rebuilt Millennium Park. The plantings along the lakeshore, or this is Horner Park in Chicago, which was a restoration and created places for people to enjoy, and we burn there. This is all the way up in northern Michigan, and this rain garden is taking water that's coming off of the lawn and uh, going into the gardens. So even though there's a well-maintained lawn, all that stuff, all that water that's coming off of there goes through those deep root systems and it's clean. This is a Southwest Michigan, and this couple asked us to do a planting around their pool because it was heretofore just turf grass, so they wanted flowers, so they can enjoy that all summer long. And the rest of the property is prairie and oak savanna and beech maple savanna. And this part of the site has no topsoil; it is all exposed clay. And we did the right species with the right fungi and the right quantities, and it has become incredible habitat, even though there is no topsoil there. The other part of the property is filled with this remnant system. This system's about 7,000 years old. So the ground is covered with things like pen sedge and James sedge and all the spring ephemerals. And we have paths cut for our client to walk through there. Pileated woodpeckers are like sparrows and starlings on this site. There's so many of them. This is the neighbor's property, and I'm standing on the property line. This is what my client's property used to look like. I turned 180 degrees. This is what my client's site looks like. We didn't plant any of that. All of those species were there. They just needed sunshine. And that grass is a very rare grass in the Midwest. It's called beet grass. And it's just thriving. One person when I took a tour of a tour of this site, they were like, I've never seen so much beet grass in my life. I'm like, yeah, we collect the seed and keep moving it around the site. Utilities, this is 2007, that's 2010, this is 2024. Dense native plantings can keep weeds out. Here's the rain gardens, the little cuts in the curbs up here. They let the rainwater in and it percolates into the ground here. Rain gardens in general are dry. They're meant to dry out to get the water into the ground. But sometimes you have wet areas you want to plant. That's a rain garden as well. That's 12 months difference. Here's that project that we saw at the beginning. There's 12 months. Right plant, right place for the job. Don't put anything super tall in there because then they'll flop down onto people's as they walk by or onto their car. And you don't want to walk in and get a face full of bees as you're trying to get into your car. This site, we worked with the owner and we cleaned it up. It was an absolute failure when we got there. And we told him, first thing, mow back from the paths so people can walk down this path. And then we just went out and kept battling back the invasive species, collecting the seed from the natives and spreading it around. And now it is just dense with native plants. This little project's about 3 acres. We've been working on this one since 1999. We don't have much to do there every year. The stewardship is very reasonable. And those Queen Anne's lace that are right there died right after I took that photograph. And that's really shallow water. At the greatest depth, it's about 2 feet. And they wanted to dredge it. I was like, absolutely not. Keep it in there because shallow water is places that wildlife like. This is blue-winged teal, and they love to nest in grasslands. And we have sandhill cranes that routinely nest there. Here's the ecosystem. We did some work for the national park. This is Indiana Dunes. Get some fire through there. All those dark stems in the middle of the ground are the short blueberries. They love fire. And then you get showy goldenrod and lupins and cocoons that all we had to do was get rid of the brush and some of the invasive species that were existed on site. Here's a local shoreline restoration and get rid of the brush and the invasive species, get the sunshine. And then right around the edge of this planting, we did a 5-foot wide buffer of native grass that had no flowers in it, because we know that the landscapers spray broadleaf herbicide on the lawn, and sometimes they spray into the plantings. Well, if they spray broadleaf herbicide into the grass planting, it doesn't hurt it. So it helps keep the broadleaf herbicides from getting into the floral planting. This is Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. This is Wrigley Field is right over here. It's the right side of this photo. And there's in the last burial was 1925, and the cemetery asked us to create this planting. We burn it, and it thrives. It's become a birding hotspot in an otherwise non-bird friendly site. This one is a stormwater management pond we started in 2007, and the shoreline was eroded. You can see this inlet and this house. This is 2009, 2012, and it's just this shoreline has held stable, and it's just beautiful all through the year. We removed a lot of invasive trees. We put some trees into the pond as well. This is the Chicago Botanic Garden. We worked with the general contractor to plant the plantings here. This mat is designed to keep the carp from getting the root systems of the native plants that are in the water. But 350,000 plugs later, and this is what it looks like. And that's 2012 or 14. This is 2022. So it's held up very well, even though there are a large carp population, because this is part of the Chicago River system. And really cool things happen. Like this is the pit and mound topography. As these trees blow over, the disc degrades into a mound, and the pit that's there ends up flooding. And it's the perfect place for frogs and salamanders, because the water dries out, so no fish will be in. And these mounds develop, moss colonies that is just incredibly beautiful to see. And in those pits, you could get things like marsh marigolds. These are in bloom right now. And then when the marsh marigolds go away, the ferns take over. So all of this was there. We didn't plant any of it. We just knew that this was a remnant system. We just needed to get sunshine to the ground. One of the bigger ones, this is a mile by a mile and a half, plus a half mile by a half mile, or a quarter mile by a quarter mile. And this is 1,200 acres just south of Chicago. This is LaGrange Road and I-80. It's called the Orland Grassland. We did this work for the Army Corps of Engineers. We removed 12 and a half miles of drain tile to rehydrate the site. The Army Corps of Engineers thought it would take 2 to 3 years to rehydrate. It took 6 months. And that we created 19 new bodies of water on the site. So all that storm water is held there, and it percolates into the ground instead of being shunted off into the stormwater management system. This is what it looked like when we started. This is what it looks like now. You can go there. It's open to the public. It's got great views. You stand on top of that little mound there, and you can see the Willis Tower in downtown Chicago, even though you're 25 miles away. Nice. We have homeowners that have us come out and, restore their what was lawn, and this is the sand next to Lake Michigan, and create beautiful sites. We have an art dealer that sells public art, and their entire showcases they have paths through the prairies so that they can show off these art pieces. And we cleaned out the area here and was just getting the sunlight to the ground so that all of these native plants could just thrive. So walking through this art dealer's property, there'll eventually be art pieces back here. And rain gardens that are designed to handle water coming off the street and cleaning it before it goes into the sewer system. And in this, it happens to be Cook County, which is a combined system. So they can be very pretty. Here's one that you take the out of row crop production, and when you do seeding, people say the seeds sleep, then they creep, then they leap. Year one, year two, year three. My clients thought, there's no way. It's not going to look good. I don't see the plants after the first year. And I'm like, patience, patience. They live about 7 miles north of me. And I got a call. They're like, you got to get up here and see this. And I walked out. I'm like, wow, that really does look good. This is amazing. It's amazing how the plant showed up. I got to say I told you so without saying I told you so. But they're really fun people, and they're like, wow. So we take seeds from this and move them around. And then lastly, I practice what I preach. I bought 40 acres of what was soybean field, worst flooded wetland. This is the uh, you know literally fills with water. There's about 18 acres of water out there right now. I have 250 species of native plants. I did this work like I'd expect my clients to, a little bit at a time, and managing the invasive species and then moving seed around. I'm a monarch migration habitat, and I've permanently protected 37 of my 40 acres. This is what happens around the first week of September every year now. This was soybean field. And if you see those little beasts on the leaves, these are monarch butterflies. One night, one year, I had close to 1,000, and I'm in the middle of 38,000 acres of corn and beans. So when I say that this works, it works because the animals tell me it works. All of those butterflies that stop here in September are the ones that go to Mexico. So they're dying for habitat, and I've provided it. And why do they stop here? Because of this. I have all the fall flowering species. My property, if you get 1 million gallons of precipitation per acre per year in this area, I put 39 million gallons of water into the ground on my property by just having native plants. So it all goes into the ground and it provides habitat. This is some of the degraded soils that I started with, and this is what it looks like. Incredible habitat. When those purple prairie clover are blooming, it sounds like a highway. Bzzz, just so many insects flying there. And I collect the seed and move it around. And if they say if you build it, they will come, it's true. They get some deer mice and shrews and voles, and then you get, like in this area, 13 line ground squirrels, and then you get the things that eat them. That's a badger, and that is my screen porch. I couldn't figure out what was digging, so I put out a game camera and I caught it one night. When that picture popped up on my computer screen, I jumped. I'm like, oh no, badgers are not like, little, pet them on the head. They're pretty a mean predator. Plus, I went to the University of Illinois, and badgers are the Wisconsin mascot. So I'm like, this isn't fair. Buffalo grass, this is a buffalo grass lawn. It doesn't require the kind of mowing that you need. I do it about once every 2 weeks to make it look like a lawn, but you could even let it go, and it's only 8 inches tall, and it's got that 8 foot deep root system. One of the coolest things is native vegetation when the sunlight hits it, and you can see the pink in the clouds. And then this was like 15 minutes, and I was just amazed at it, and the colors that pop when the sky changes. And Illinois, we have the best sunsets. I'm sorry, I've been around the world. I still think that the sunrises and sunsets are amazing in Illinois. I took this from my patio. And then this is our corporate facility, and the green part of this 40 acres is all remnant natural area that has never been destroyed. It's all protected in a conservation easement. Then this is all the production space for the nursery. We produce this year will be 2.5 million native plants. This is a crop of Carex Jamesii. We do kits and that go out via our retail partners. And we do a lot of tours. Another YouTuber, There she grows. Came out and I walked her around. This is a garden club. We're having our solstice event on June 19th. It's education about restoration, a tour of the nursery, and a tour of the remnant natural area. And in the middle of the natural area is a glacial cane, which is a pile of gravel and clay left by the glaciers. And for DeKalb County, Illinois, which is flat, this is a mountain. You stand up on top of it, and you can see for 5 to 7 miles. It's just been a neat little piece of property that I decided to save. And this all happened there. In 2019, the Halberd Indian plant bloomed a little late, and there were hundreds, probably close to 500, 700 monarchs, plus every other pollinator you can imagine. And this is in the middle of 22,000 acres of corn and beans. So again, if everybody asks me how much matters, I'm like, every square foot matters. It matters to get that groundwater, that storm water, but it also matters for wildlife habitat. Cool things like blue cardinal flower, which has every color of the rainbow because there's good genetic diversity, and then purple false foxglove, which is one of the rarer plants. It's the native annual. And then when you have amazing habitat, you get really interesting birds. And I'm kind of a birder, but I'm a plant person. But birders to me are crazy. They travel. Like, oh my God, there's ibis on our site. They were there for 3 weeks, and there were 100 cars per day parked there. We loved them because they came and left money in DeKalb County, and then they went home. But lastly, I would say just remember this is all about people. You got to find something they value and connect it to restoration or native plant landscaping or naturalized landscaping. Once they do that, they will make it theirs. And then they can't unsee it. So remember, get people out there, show them, walk them around, learn. If you see a bug, take a picture of it, and have what bug is this app or iNaturalist tell you what it is, and then you can start to put together all the pieces of the puzzle that when you're doing work like this, that create that change, that dynamic system. So there you go. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That was fantastic, Jack. And I just love seeing all the projects that Pizzo has been involved in around the Chicago area, seeing the Field Museum, seeing the oil and grasslands, places that I personally love, and seeing your company's involvement in them and taking them, back to nature and giving all these people inspirational points where they can go and experience nature. Like you said, it's about the people bring us together and get us inspired. So I'm feeling very inspired today. Um, I wanted to just ask a couple questions.
Sure.
First one is just about for homeowners dealing with the small areas of standing water. What would the best way for them to be would it be for them to get started?
So first and foremost, the smaller the area, the lower the diversity of plants. So don't think, 10 by 10 area, you're going to get 50 species. The site conditions might be right for 3 or 4. So think that the smaller it is, the less diversity. And then plant densely 6 inches to 12 inches on center, meaning like a dot pattern. If you were to measure it, that would be it. And then look to things that are local. So if you're looking at creating a rain garden, let's say it's 20 by 20, you might do northern drop seed, which is a beautiful clump forming grass that's only, 12 to 18 inches high. It's about 2 feet wide, really fine textured. You might do a border of that around your garden and then put, you know, uh, something like iris in the native iris, and then you might do What else? Let me think off the top of my head. Some yellow coneflower and stuff that they'll tolerate that moist soil. If it's really wet, then you would err on the side of those plants that have in that list that have negative numbers and just plant them in groups. They'll move around on their own. In smaller plantings, make it look like a perennial garden in a divot or a bioswale. I call a perennial garden in a ditch. You can design it, but each plant list is unique to the site. But if you want to make it look like Martha Stewart's perennial garden, it's great because wildlife doesn't care, and the broken up soil, water will go down the same as it is if it's planted randomly like nature has it.
Got it. And what about like the soil conditions themselves? So a lot of us have clay soil in this area. How do you know if something is like a super wet area versus just medium wet, or does it even matter?
It it doesn't really matter. Clay is a gift because clay holds water. Now that is like, oh, we ought to get rid of the water. But actually, because it holds that water and it's really fine. These are clay particles are tiny. There are not a lot of spaces in between the clay particles. And that means they hold nutrients and they'll give up nutrients if you get the roots in there. So in a clay soil, you might till in some organic matter like leaf compost. But if the budget's small, then just kill the grass. A little bit of Roundup on there, let it die, and then drill right into that dead sod. And then plant those plants that belong there, and then put some of that mycorrhizal fungi. If you're doing gardening, small scale stuff, Roots Incorporated, I think, is a company. They make mycorrhizal fungi. And you just sprinkle that stuff into the holes or on the soil, and then it germinates and goes out and colonizes the soil. Well, that colonizes the soil, and the plant roots follow that. Then that breaks it up. So ultimately, you might find that wet areas actually dry out a little more because you've broken up that soil, which allows water to percolate in. Plus, the plants are pulling moisture out of the soil.
And is there a good time to plant? Like the spring is
No,
obviously very wet, or no? Any,
no, there's no good time and there's no bad time. It all depends upon the site and when you have the wherewithal to do it. So in the wintertime, if you have a larger space and the soil's been tilled, you can plant the seed in the winter on the snow or on the bare frozen ground because the freeze thaw cycle will work those seed right into the ground at the right depth. Now, obviously, planting plants, you have to wait until the soil's workable. But if you can get out there in March or April or May or whenever it is at your time that the ground is workable, realize that plants need supplemental water. If the ground is drier or has dried out, you want to make sure. And typically, if you use plugs, 6 to 8 weeks, no more than 12 weeks of water, and those plants will be fine for the rest of your life and my life because they've got their roots established. As soon as they get out of that nursery soil, they're harvesting water, and excuse me, that's the mycorrhizal fungi dissolve the nutrients in water and give them to the plants in water. So inoculated roots are 10 times more efficient than uninoculated roots. So you get this whole thing. And so you can plant anytime. You could plant in the middle of summer in July. I mean, we did that, the first project, the rain garden in Chicago in July. They had an old irrigation system in there. And I just said, look, leave these heads and turn them on. Give me 8 weeks worth of water. After that, you can abandon it entirely. So
and,
that's it.
and final question, just where does the term rain garden come from? We get that question a lot. What does that mean, and where did this come from?
It's a it's far as I know, it's like one of these, I'm sure some internet sleuth will find the exact origin. It's just a garden that harvests rain. So it's a divot or a depression, and you put native plants in there, and the roots break up the soil so that the water can go into the ground. Or if it's totally a saturated soil, you create a garden in essence with plants that evolved in those conditions. So it's a garden that's fed by rain.
Got
I
it.
guess that's every garden, right?
Right, right. But this one might just have extra rain.
Yes, yes. I mean, my undergraduate's horticulture, and my master's is ecology, and I have a license as a landscape architect. And so it really, all these terms, I'm just like, well, that kind of applies to everywhere, to horticulture, to landscape ecology, to landscape architecture.
And these plants are tough. I mean, they can deal with multiple conditions. So it's definitely good to know what they prefer, but they also can tolerate a range of conditions too.
Yep.
Well, this was fantastic, Jack. I really appreciate you coming and presenting for us this evening. I learned something every time you present. It was just really fantastic. So we thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. And my contact info was up there if you'll share that. I always say, please, you got a question, get a hold of me. Send me an email. I have one I have to answer. I got got it right after a presentation in Southern Illinois, and um, I've it's just been busy traveling, speaking, that I haven't had a chance. But in general, I get back to you within, if it's not the couple of days, I'll just let you know I'm busy, and I'll get around to answering the questions. The more complex, the longer it might take me to answer. But I love doing it because I learn from you guys. The how to talk about it, where to talk about something that's unique or difficult, or light bulb moment. Well, I just connected these two things that heretofore had never been connected in my head. So
Yep, you're a fantastic resource and educator, and we appreciate you educating us. So,
happy to help. So get a hold of me if you need me.
all right. And with that, we will sign off for this evening. And thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you.